Welcome to Journey Through the Gospels. Here we explore the stories of the Gospel through history, faith, and cinematic storytelling. Evening was falling over Jerusalem, and the long day of crucifixion was coming to an end. Jesus had died, and the city was moving toward the Sabbath. What had seemed unthinkable only days before had now happened in full view of the crowds. The teacher who had healed, taught, and raised others now lay lifeless. At that moment, two quiet figures stepped forward with courage. Joseph of Arimathea went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. John also tells us that Nicodemus came, bringing a large amount of burial spices. These were not men acting in safety or comfort. In the shadow of public rejection, they chose to honor Jesus openly. There was little time before sunset. The Gospels describe a burial marked by care, but also by urgency. Jesus was wrapped in linen and laid in a new tomb cut into the rock. John says the tomb was in a garden near the place where he was crucified, a nearby resting place chosen because the Sabbath was close. The women who had followed Jesus from Galilee did not leave the scene. They watched where he was laid. In their grief, they paid attention to the details others might forget. They saw the tomb, they saw the stone, and they remembered the place so they could return after the Sabbath with spices and mourning. Then the entrance was closed. A great stone was rolled across the mouth of the tomb. It was a visible sign of finality, the kind of sight that tells grieving hearts there is nothing more to be done. Death, it seemed, had spoken the last word. Matthew adds another detail that deepens the tension. The chief priests and Pharisees went to Pilate and asked for the tomb to be secured. They remembered that Jesus had spoken about rising again, and they feared deception more than they feared injustice. So the tomb was sealed, and guards were posted. Human authority did everything it could to make the grave certain and unbreakable. Then came the silence of Holy Saturday. Jerusalem rested under the Sabbath while sorrow settled over the disciples. The city that had shouted, accused, judged, and watched now became quiet. Nothing appeared to move, nothing appeared to change. Yet this silence was not empty. It was the silence between burial and revelation. This part of the story matters deeply. Jesus did not escape death before entering it. He truly died. He was truly buried. The tomb was real, the grief was real, and the waiting was real. The gospel does not rush past this darkness. It lets us feel the weight of it. Many people know something of that kind of waiting. There are moments in life that feel like sealed tombs, moments when hope seems shut behind stone and silence. Holy Saturday gives language to that experience. It is the day when the promises of God seem hidden, and still the faithful are called to endure the night. After the Sabbath, before the city was fully awake, the women returned. They came at early dawn with spices, not because they expected a miracle, but because love had brought them back. They were coming to honor the dead. Their devotion makes the next moment even more powerful because they were not searching for signs of resurrection. They were simply being faithful. When they arrived, the stone had been moved. The tomb stood open before them. Matthew describes an earthquake and an angel descending. Mark, Luke, and John each tell the discovery in their own way, but all agree on the shock of the empty tomb. The place where Jesus had been laid no longer held him. In the Synoptic Gospels, heavenly messengers speak the words that changed history. He is not here, he is risen. Luke records the question, "Why do you seek the living among the dead?" It is one of the most powerful questions in Scripture because it reveals that the world has changed. The tomb is no longer the final address of the Son of God, yet the first response was not easy triumph. It was fear, trembling, confusion, and astonishment. Mark especially preserves that sense of shock. Luke tells us the apostles did not immediately accept the women's report. These first witnesses were not inventing a simple, polished story. They were overwhelmed by something they had never expected to see. Peter ran to the tomb. John tells us that the beloved disciple ran with him. They stooped down and looked inside. The body was gone. The linen cloths remained, and the tomb itself became a silent witness that something beyond human power had happened there. The disciples were not yet standing in full understanding, but the old certainty of death had already begun to break apart. Then John brings us into one of the most personal moments in the resurrection story. Mary Magdalene stayed outside the tomb and wept. Even after seeing the empty place, her heart was still wrapped in grief. She looked into the tomb and saw angels, but sorrow still held her vision. Then she turned and saw Jesus standing there, though she did not know at first that it was him. The turning point came with a single word. Jesus said her name, Mary. In that moment, grief became recognition. The shepherd had called one of his own by name, and she knew his voice. The silence of the tomb gave way to living presence. The one she had come to mourn was now speaking to her. Matthew tells us that Jesus also met the women, and they took hold of his feet and worshipped him. This is important because the resurrection is not presented as an idea, a memory, or a symbol. The risen Christ stands before his followers. He speaks. He is recognized. He sends them with a message for the disciples. The empty tomb leads to living encounter. This is why Easter stands at the very center of the Christian faith. The resurrection is God's answer to the grave, to fear, to sin, and to death itself. The tomb was sealed. The witnesses were grieving. The disciples were afraid. No one was standing outside that tomb waiting confidently for the stone to roll away. And that is part of the strength of the story. The resurrection broke into a world that had already accepted death as final. In Orthodox Christian worship, Holy Saturday holds this mystery with deep reverence. Christ rests in the tomb, yet even there he is not defeated. Pascha then bursts forth as the feast of victory, not by denying the sorrow of the cross, but by revealing what God has done through it. The place of burial becomes the place where death begins to lose its power. So this story moves from careful burial to astonished witness, from sealed stone to open tomb, from weeping to recognition. Joseph gives Jesus a tomb. The women return in love. Peter runs. Mary hears her name, and the first day of the week becomes the dawn of new creation. What seemed like the end was only the silence before resurrection. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more gospel stories.